Psychedelics just help us reveal what's buried. And then it's our work after and during to clean up what's buried. And if the whole world was, especially Americans, if we were achieving not from a space of not enoughness, but a space of enough, how many marriages would not suffer as much? How many kids would feel more nourished and loved? How much more wholeness? And we would be creating from a frequency of wholeness instead of a frequency of scarcity.
Welcome, tribe. I'm Maya Rose.
And I'm Gerald Rogers. We're about to embark on another mind-expanding episode where we dive deep into the realms of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
This is a transformational experience of healing, manifestation, increased clarity, flow, and alignment.
So join us on this sacred journey as we receive the codes of transformation from scientists and psychonauts, shamans, tantra masters, mystics, and more.
Together, we'll unravel the secrets of plant medicine, sex magic, and other tools to tap into higher states of consciousness.
So why are we here? To answer the call, to share our passions and be advocates for alternative healing.
So get ready for a ride that transcends the ordinary and leads you to the extraordinary, because living a legendary life is not just a choice.
It's a sacred adventure. Welcome to Psychedelics, Sex and the Superconscious. Today we are going to be diving into the idea of peak performance and the use of psychedelics and other tools to help us perform better. And so we have with us the one and only Mike Zeller. I am super excited to dive into this conversation because Mike and I share a lot of passions around the mind and hypnosis, NLP, all of these different tools to help reprogram subconscious, to optimize our performance and our life experience. And I'm really excited to geek out with some of the science and some of the wisdom he has. And honestly, I'm just excited to connect with my soul brother Mike, who I just got for the first time at the Psychedelic Science Conference in Denver, and just feel really, really stoked to begin this relationship with you. So Mike, I want to give you just a moment as we dive in to just take a chance to apologetically brag about yourself.
Well, on the bragging part, I'll just mention, I've worked with over 500 leaders rewiring their subconscious, their nervous system, now from trauma to peak performance. But I kind of stumbled into psychedelics. I would say I got backed into a corner between a rock and a hard place where I felt like I had no other options that were viable, which was besides turning towards psychedelics. And I was with my wife, is a 3-time suicide survivor. And when we got pregnant with our daughter, it triggered an avalanche of mental health problems, complex PTSD flare-up, panic attacks 3 to 5 times a week, in a deep depression battle for almost 2 years, and or I would say a little over 2 years. And psychedelics in combination with therapeutic outcomes and somatic, IFS, parts work, NLP, and metabolic health optimization were all the kind of key ingredients for getting her naturally curative depression, and we'd say mostly curative or complex PTSD, and her panic attacks have essentially subsided entirely too. So, and then I started weaving this in, the medicine work into the work that I do with leaders, because I saw, hey, if it works this well on trauma and depression, where it's deeply the most stuck individuals, most stuck crises of life, what could it do for peak performance, where you're trying to gain access to rewire the code, to rewire the automatic responses, your default mechanisms? And so I was like, man, this could be the greatest breakthrough, not only in mental health, but the greatest breakthrough in peak performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, I love that. Rewind back in time with us and share where this passion for peak performance emerged for you, like why it became relevant for you in your life.
Yeah, my dad, he was German, and he was very kind of strict, driven towards almost perfection, high standards, immigrant, typical immigrant, high standards, have to really work through, earn their place. I guess it wasn't given, it had to be earned. And so the seed was planted there. Then I started some Tony Robbins in my early 20s. And I was like, whoa, like his personal power too. Didn't go to a Tony Robbins event until I was 31. And that blew my mind, which is crazy now to think that was so far or so long ago. I'm 46 now. So anyway, that awakened me to more of who I could become. And also got my master NLP practitioner like 15, 16 years ago. Loved that. That definitely helped stir me to another level, or rise to another level. I guess it's actually pretty closer to 18, 19 years now. And then I just always had a high drive. Like I wanted to be a pro athlete when I was in college. In high school, I wanted to play pro baseball. Always tried to do my best. So I was already like pretty driven as an individual. And then when I started incorporating psychedelics, I was like, man, this is essentially a guaranteed gateway to open up the subconscious, to get to the hardest stuff that we might spend. Like if you do a regular coaching or regular, like I did 14 Tony Robbins events and spent 1,447 hours with Tony Robbins, walked on fire 3 times. Well, I can essentially get to where it might take him 70 hours in a program, like a week-long event. I can get there in 3 hours with the medicine to get to the primal or deeper than he could get, just because the medicine uncooks our turkey. And so now I've probably read 2,000 something books. I love the world I get to swim in, the people I get to serve, and it's a ton of fun. So
I love that. Yeah, I think it's also super wild for me because in my background, when I started first getting exposed to the transformational world, I got like really passionate about like subconscious reprogramming and stuff, and so dove into NLP and hypnosis and all these different tools. And for over a decade, I was leading these transformational events, which were essentially breakthrough events designed to help people rewrite their story of who they think they are. We called it identity work, and then I actually discovered the power of psychedelics. I'm like, why am I wasting time trying to like enter through their conscious mind to somehow weave down to their unconscious actually, space where we can move? Why don't we just like shut the conscious mind off altogether and like
exactly get right there,
get into the super conscious mind where we can just like have like a an extremely malleable state to work with. And so I think that's why I became passionate too, because I felt like honestly like I could do 10 years worth of transformational work that would what would take 10 years in traditional therapy, it could happen in like one night or one session.
Exactly.
So I love to pass.
I'm curious, how long ago was that for you?
That I kind of like really started to tap into the psychedelic aspects?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it began 2014, over 11 years ago, when I experienced ayahuasca for the first time. Ayahuasca was my unquote gateway drug. Down in Colombia.
You jumped right in.
A week-long experience there, and it just like transported me to like another universe, and then powerful psilocybin ceremonies and stuff. But I didn't actually feel confidence in starting to integrate it into my work and probably until 2019, 2020.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
It still feels like this wild frontier. I'm curious, like for you, because I think the thing I've always been amazed at is just even with like traditional talk therapy, which I think is about the least effective modality for change on the planet, but it's still like the go-to for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That combined with MDMA or some of these other psychedelics is wildly successful, right? Like it's incredibly powerful, and the MAPS has done and all these other organizations, like just combined with traditional talk therapy is like the results are astounding. I can only imagine what you're experiencing combining it with NLP and, internal family systems and some of the other things. Can you share with us like what that looks like when you're combining these like really more potent modalities with psychedelics?
Yeah. I'll share a couple stories as well, but I would say in general, I tell my clients at the beginning, and I deal with some of the most stuck cases, like meaning they've tried 30. I had one client that tried 90 different modalities to work through some of her trauma, and we basically got to it in the first session or two. And but I tell people, hey, at the beginning, it's as close to a guarantee of transformation as you can possibly experience, and that I've seen so far. And I'll even give people their money back if they don't get a breakthrough. And so far, I tell them, hey, I'll give you your money back if you don't have a huge shift. Not saying I'm going to get you all the way healed in a single session or whatever, because healing takes time and your body goes at its own pace. So far, I've never had anyone ask for their money back. So that feels pretty great. But what happens, so I look at all transformation through the lens of 4 filters: spiritual, mental or cognitive, psychological, 3rd, emotional, and then 4th, somatic, or in your body. And if you don't hit on all 4 levels, like why cognitive behavioral therapy? It's cognitive. 83% of therapists are cognitive behavioral therapists. And it's only hitting on one level, and it's not hitting on your default automatic nervous system. And some of the trauma is pre-verbal. Like I had a session a couple of weeks ago from a client that flew her husband down, and they're in a marital crisis. He's got massive amounts of trauma. His nervous system is stuck in a fight or flight mode. Well, almost, I'd say 60, 70% of it was pre-verbal before the age of 2 or 3. And so his nervous system, what good is talk therapy going to do? If it's pre-verbal, it's in your nervous system. He described himself as feral, like that part of him, that little feral child that was just so punished and so rejected and so unloved. And so we were able to tap in and do some healing. He's not all the way done, but his wife sends me a message afterwards. She's like, Mike, he is the most gentle and present I've ever experienced him when he gets home. And so I see my wife, I mean, she was in a year plus of somatic IFS, like deep trauma therapy. And she'd make incremental progress for like 4 or 5 hours. Like she'd feel much better after the therapy session. And then she'd be around our daughter, and our daughter would cry and activate her nervous system's overwhelm response and her PTSD from her childhood trauma. And she'd have all these flashbacks and hypervigilance and start spiraling into depression. Literally, if our daughter cried for longer than 30 seconds, I literally grab my daughter when she would start crying. At the time, she was like 20 months old, and I'd carry her into the street in our neighborhood screaming. Because like, if I keep her in the house, my wife is going to spiral. Or I'd yell at my wife, get out of the house, go, go, go. Well, after we did the work, after I started putting together the science, I was like, the medicine plus the trauma work while you're in the state, because you got 2 major windows when you do the medicine. You got the acute subjective window, which is the high, the journey, the 3 to 6 hour type journey. And then you got the critical period reopening, which is the second major phase, which is 2.5 weeks or so with psilocybin and MDMA. When that first window is when you can do, your nervous system is more open than any known point in your life. And you can turn programs on and off. You can recode the programming, right? You can change the programs if you know what you're doing. And so I consider myself like a neurosurgeon in the subconscious mind. I want to go in. My clients, actually I have like 12 surgeons as clients. They literally will have surgery the next day or that same day. And so I can't, now they're not taking the medicines the same day, but they might have surgery the next day. And so they need to be put back together, and they need to be in a great space. And so I have to go in and clean up. It's like I'm cleaning up the cancer and getting the tumors out and then sewing them back in, putting in some good stuff. They don't have 6 months to unwind and become a mess, right? So what I find is if we can go in, work through the parts, work through that inner child, work through the body's memory of it, like in the same session and working on the same memory, I'm anchoring in the spiritual, the emotional, the mental, and the psychological, right? Or the whatever, all 4 levels: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. So that was a mouthful. I want to pause. before I keep going.
That's amazing, and it makes sense, because like when so much of the trauma is stored at these deep levels of the unconscious and these somatic like levels, like just can't approach it with the mind. It
No.
just doesn't work, and so it really requires that you shut off the default node, network and like be able to like really, create this neuroplasticity. Like what are your favorite medicines and modalities? Like when you're actually working with people, like what medicine do you find is like most useful to get them in that highly repairable state, and like any specific like modalities you feel like in that state
Yeah.
really allow for the greatest and most accelerated change?
Yeah. My favorites that are the most predictable are MDMA. Well, I'd say MDMA, 2CB, and psilocybin. And in different strains of psilocybin have very different effects. So I'm very intentional with certain strands. And but reason MDMA is an associative, it's an empathogen, so it allows us to safely feel. And I look at it as like it coats our nervous system with a feeling of love and safety. So we can go through the eye of the storm. We can go through, like I love it for sexual trauma. I've had clients that we've dealt with like history of being raped by a family member, and we've walked through, and it's like their nervous system is coated with a shield, and we don't need to relive it, but we need to, that part of them that was still holding on to the pain and still activated. Like one of my clients in her 50s had been raped over 80 times, 82 times to be exact, from an older brother and her older stepbrother. And then her older real brother had been raped 120 times by that same older brother. So crazy amounts of abuse, right? Well, as we did the session, now her nervous system is coated. She was so intense, so wound up. Like before, even in the session, it was the most intense session I've probably ever had. At the end, it was 7 hours later, and then the next day, she was softened. It was like her body's intensity just dropped by like 50%. She still had more work to do after that one session. So I use it to work through inner child work. MDMA, I'm doing inner child somatic work, helping their body recalibrate to a sense of safety. And because it literally gives you the neurotransmitter of love and safety, that really, really helps. Then I'll use psilocybin, because sometimes we need to just say, all right, we worked through this. Now we're gone. We're in a separate spot. We're in a different location. Our mind is different. Our spirit, our energy is different. So psilocybin disassociates. And then I'll also use psilocybin. I've used it before where someone had deep repressed memories that their conscious mind or protector parts were really blocking, not letting them get to, but they were running the show in the background, like really subterfuge. And so I use psilocybin with MDMA. So I usually do a stack, the MDMA first and then psilocybin. And I gave her a bigger dose of psilocybin because it was our 4th session and she really wanted to and it was also childhood rape that we were dealing with in this case. And we got right there, and the protector part finally showed us what had happened. She was able to process it, integrate, work through it. Doesn't mean it was easy. Like she was, anger was coming through, all this repressed emotion that she'd been holding on to. So it was a very intense session. And she was even saying in the middle of it, she'd be like, she's like screaming, angry, all this stuff. And it was a little like that would calibrate her back down. And she also knew, like, she'd be like, Mike, I'm not angry at you, just so you know. And then she'd go back into her angry part. And I was letting her angry part have a feeling of expression instead of suppress it. It was modulated, even though it was intense. She knew. So if you're in trauma work, you got to modulate different things and not re-experience it. She wasn't re-experiencing it because she would flip in and out. And then once that part had fully processed, then that part felt safe. And so the psilocybin I use it to crack people open after we've already done some work and their protector parts are resisting, because it's hard to control. So psilocybin will bring repressed memories up to the surface, but we have to have enough trust, rapport, a baseline before we do something more intense like that. And they
Yeah.
have to want that. Like, I'm not forcing it on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really, really interested in diving into how this relates to peak performance and getting people to like really perform better. Because I mean, obviously, um, the only thing that limits us is the subconscious beliefs or barriers that we
Yeah.
have. But it's also interesting too, because at some level, like I heard someone say this recently and it rung so true. And they said they said success for most people is a trauma response.
Yeah.
For
Good.
most people, their drive for more and their drive for validation, their drive for more money is driven by this internal wound of not enoughness,
Yeah.
and so I'm
Yeah.
curious, like when you're doing like the psychedelic work and the deep trauma work, how do you heal that wound of not enoughness and get them optimized for peak performance?
Yeah. It's funny you said that. So Thursday last week, I had a client. He lives in like a probably 10, $15 million house. It's probably worth over $100 million. And in our session, he literally has on the table an option. He's in his early 60s to build a $2.4 billion company. So we're working through, but he's also like navigating. Doesn't he really need that? Doesn't he really want? I'm not gonna say his name. Don. Old Don would want to do this, right? But his heart connected self is like, you know what? Do I really need this? And what is that going to do to my health? I'm a grandfather now, like, or soon to be a grandfather. And he's like excited about the season of life. And there's an acceptance, and we've kind of healed and worked through that enoughness where he feels enough. But some of the most traumatized people are some of the most successful people, and they're so driven to experience love. And so one of the things, it is a lot of inner child work, a lot of like, one of the things I work people towards is sometimes we're working driven. So a lot of top performers are driven so hard internally because they don't feel that they are enough. And so instead, if we could flip it, that I create because I am enough. I am enough, so therefore I create. Instead of I'm not enough, so I must create to become enough. So it's a very different perspective and an energy of like creating from this full cup and out of a state of love where you're not overstraining. Like I have one of my other clients, she's one of the top people in the world in AI and very successful. She has basically 2 full-time jobs, her own business, a booming speaking career, and 2 kids under 10. And so she's on the edge of burnout. She's not fully aware of it. So we're working towards elements around bringing her back into this sense of safety and love,
Yeah,
safety, and that she is enough.
I really love that. I want to highlight how significant that is. The drive for significance or success from a trauma motivator versus the drive for fulfillment and, creation based
Impact.
on
Yeah.
impact based on purpose and wholeness, right? They're very different. And I love witnessing people make that transition. I have one friend
Yeah.
of mine who, I mean, he's a fucking empire builder. He just like he so many successful companies, massive real estate portfolio, definitely on track to become a billionaire. And then he discovered plant medicine, and he just got like really wrapped in the question is like, how much is enough? And the
Yeah.
previous version of him, there wasn't a number that was enough. There
Yeah.
was a constant drive for there had to be more, and if there wasn't more, then there was this gaping black hole, that was driving
Yeah.
him forward. And then diving into plant medicine work, he found that space where he could really attune to the trauma that was underneath it, and
Yeah.
it just shifted his priority. But I think even more important than that is like redefining what success is. For
Yeah.
success, for some people is the amount of money in the bank, the big car, the big house, whatever. And those are all beautiful things, but there's some level of that which will never, achievement is never going to actually create fulfillment. And Tony Robbins talks about this, like these two pillars of success: achievement and fulfillment. And
Exactly.
I love that success. For me, psychedelics seems to be like really, really, really potent to add the fulfillment piece at a deep level, because
Yeah.
it helps fill in those gaps of internal self-love and this like this drive to create validation, to prove our value, because psychedelics somehow, in a really meaningful setting, give us the capacity to remember our innate divinity
Yeah.
that existed beyond whatever's happened to us.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Psychedelics just help us reveal what's buried. And then it's our work after enduring to like clean up what's buried. And if the whole world was, especially Americans, if we were achieving not from a space of not enoughness, but a space of enough, how many marriages would not suffer as much? How many kids would feel more nourished and loved? How much more wholeness? And we would be creating from a frequency of wholeness instead of a frequency of scarcity.
I'm curious, when you're doing this work, when you actually help people heal that core trauma, do you sometimes notice that the things in their life that were created from the frequency of the trauma begin falling apart? Do you notice that sometimes when people create a relationship and it's a trauma bond, a trauma relationship, or they build a business based on their not enoughness, and once they heal it, do you sometimes see them go through a period of, those things collapsing that they had created from the old frequency?
I don't see, like, if I'm looking at the external business side or something like that, or marriage, I typically don't see it collapse. I do see those things repattern in relationship with themselves, or the relationship with work shifts to a much healthier state. And then what typically happens is it ends up being a significant benefit. Like wives, I'll get texts from wives that, like, they'll say things like, "Mike, I don't know what you did with my husband, but whatever you did, keep doing, because he came back. He's so much more present. So he was great before, but now I got Jeff back in a way I have not felt for 15 years." Or I literally got a text from a client. She's an executive at this company that did an executive retreat with her, and her husband, who's a Navy SEAL. So he's a Navy SEAL, active duty, right? And she sends me a text that I screenshotted, I saved it. It says, "Mike, you won't believe what my husband said to me. He said, a couple days after I got back from the retreat, he's like, what happened to my crazy, neurotic, stressed out, overwhelmed, panic-driven wife? Where did she go?" And I was like, yes, this is what I want. And I get texts like that all the time, and it's pretty fun. I'm gonna grab one of the others. But anyway, so like seeing those sorts of things happen, man, that brings me so much juice. And it's so fun to see, and it can happen in an instant. It takes us a while to sometimes get there, though. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love hearing those stories. And that is honestly the most fulfilling part of the work, is just like radical shifts in how someone shows up in the world, just because they're operating from a new blueprint.
Yeah. I'll read. Here's the actual quote. "Mike, I want to stop this morning and show my gratitude. It's slightly unnerving. I do not even recognize myself. I am calm and collected. anxiety free, and loving myself again. I hate being the center of attention, but I led the team meeting on Monday after you left. My husband asked, "Who are you? And what did you do with my anxious, angry, frustrated wife?" It's almost it's almost as if I can feel an internal battle. The old me is trying to escape, but the greater, new version of me takes over and says, "Not right now. Not right now." So,
That's great. That's really
yeah.
interesting. So, and I want to talk about like this role of integration, just because I know, the journey of medicine work and stepping into it, like it really has the different phases. There's work that needs to happen before, and everything
Yeah.
leading up to the ceremony, experience of the ceremony, and all the different parts and things in there. But I also really loved how you mentioned that there's a couple weeks after where the brain is still like really open,
Yeah.
and it's processing and it's integrating this new identity into the real life. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short in their work,
Yeah.
is like the integration period, and just being really intentional of knowing how to maximize that extended state of neuroplasticity and beyond, just to make sure that the transformation actually sticks. So I would love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on integration protocol and what's really
Mhm.
required to make transformation stick.
Yeah. Good question. I actually consider part of my job as a guide, as a peak performance guide, is even while we're in session, I'm actually future pacing their nervous system into their new life, into their real life. So like I'll in the middle of the session, I'll be like, okay, so Natalie, next week, you described that you get triggered when this happens, when your kids do this. Can you notice yourself that you have the capacity to choose a different path? That you have the capacity to choose loving connection and staying grounded as your kids are spazzing out, and that you can bring them back into a state of regulation. You can bring them back in a state of presence by staying connected and soothing yourself. Go ahead and take a moment. Imagine yourself practicing self regulation, grounding yourself, breathing, coming back into your body in the midst of the chaos around you. And so I'll actually do a begin integration in the session because I want to them, and because we have that opening, I want to create a new neural pathway. I look at the work is like, all right, the desired destination is on the other side of a forest in your mind, and there's no path. Well, I want to blaze a path through the neuroforest of their mind while we're in session. And then when we do an integration call, now I typically do one integration call. Now, if it's more complex and there's more coming up, I'll do more integration calls and have containers that if they need more integration work afterwards, which a lot of people do. And I have a whole integration guide, and I want people to practice the embodiment because half of the transformation is the post session work. It is the integration. If you don't do the integration, you just often had a beautiful experience and experience another access point of where you could get to the joy, the peace, the love, the confidence, whatever. Well, that's not as valuable as if we create a pathway for you to move in that direction and just give you a turbo boost to go down that pathway in your whole new patterns, how you relate to your spouse, how you relate to your kids, how you relate to yourself, how you relate to money, whatever it is. So for me, I want people to do meditations, microdosing oftentimes. I have guided meditations. I have a set of journal questions. I have a bunch of podcasts that I have people listen to. I have my YouTube videos. I give them typically 2 or 3 books to read as well that deepen. They're usually short, so it's not overwhelming. So I kind of want to stack the whole transformation container with as much as possible that is not overwhelming over the next 2 weeks. That's the right dose. That's a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit more than they might do ordinarily, and retrain. The goal is to retrain how you show up.
Hmm.
So I don't know if
Yeah,
that answered the question or not.
yeah, no, because I think that I've done transformational seminars and events for 15 years,
Yeah.
and something I just saw over and over again is so many people would have like this peak experience, but then
Yeah.
they'd go back and what they go back to is they go back to their old home where everything in that home and everything in that past life was a representation of their old identity.
Yeah.
Everywhere from like their furniture to their clothes to their friends to their
Yeah.
refrigerator, everything was
Exactly. Yeah.
created from who they used to be.
Hmm.
And the reason why most people struggled to stick with their changes and stick with their commitments is because there would be a battle between all of these reminders of their past self and their new self trying to fit into that. And most people, without support and integration, drift back into the old patterns,
Correct.
which is why I think it's so important. You just like bombard people at the beginning with like new patterns and experiences and
Yeah.
reminders. And I always tell people like, when you go home, go through your closet and clear out all the clothes that represent your old self,
Yeah. That's good to have it. Yeah.
rearrange the furniture in your bedroom, do different things to have these like reminders that a new version of you, get a new haircut, like
Yeah.
a makeover, like hire a personal trainer, do something so that
Hmm.
the life you're stepping into is different than the
Yeah.
one that you came from. And when that happens, then all of a sudden there's this
Yeah.
instant validation that
Yeah.
an identity level shift has occurred.
Hmm. Spot on. Yeah. And I would add, along those lines, it's like, man, when we do that, any the more subconscious reminders that we can have, that's just an automatic. So like I'll have people listen to the playlist that we played in ceremony, and they're like, Mike, that brings me right back into that peaceful, joyful, blissful state. It reminds them of who they are and what they just experienced. So it's like I want them to keep marinating in that new state,
Yeah.
that new awareness. And so the more they can do that, the better. So I'm probably going to start incorporating some clear out some clothes. I haven't done that yet. So that's a great caveat.
Yeah, that's super fun. So I want to talk just in the last few minutes we have. I would love for you to share, I guess, what's on the horizon for you and what are you excited about, even for the horizon of humanity as psychedelics become more prevalent or, like accepted and like really like I would love for you to future pace and like when you look at the future and your future and what you're up to and what's going on in the world, what are the things that excite you the most?
Yeah, I think we're still on the front end of the tail of the psychedelic movement in many regards because less than probably 5% of Americans have done any sort of psychedelics. And so I think we've got a huge opportunity with that. I think the most like the diffusion of innovations where the early adopters, the innovators and early adopters kind of adopt first. We're still not even into the early adopters phase fully yet. And I think we're going to see a boom in the next 5 years of leaders, executives, athletes, celebrities becoming more and more fans of psychedelics, whether they are legally approved or not. People, the higher performers, they don't care. They're not like I see less hesitation, way less hesitation with because they're kind of used to breaking the rules. You start a company, you innovate, you create, you're not following the paradigm of kind of job thinking or whatever. So I see it getting improved eventually, but it's going to be a struggle to get there, even with RFK or wherever you're at on the Maha movement. There's elements of, Big Pharma has its teeth, its tendrils stuck in, and like if you think I've had clients that were on Lexapro for 20 years, the biggest dose, legally allowed, and they're off of it in 2 months. So, and probably permanently off of that medication, right? And so like Big Pharma has massive stakes in people being medicated. And I think psychedelics, when you get mostly cured of a lifelong struggle in 2 to 3, 4 sessions and need just a handful of microdoses here or there to kind of lightly reduce your anxiety or whatever, that's a big difference in a lifetime subscription. And so I think we're going to have some more resistance around it. There's going to be some more half-truths spread by, that is going to filter into media. But, the science is emerging. The science is basically indisputable that these medicines are very healing. They're very safe. Like, as you know, probably the Lancelet study in 2010, biggest drug safety study ever done. Guess what the most dangerous substance is? That's legally promoted and available. Alcohol
Yeah.
has more harm to users and harm to others than any other drug. Mushrooms and LSD are all the way at the bottom. They're literally 1/10 of as dangerous as alcohol, but they're portrayed as way more dangerous. Or MDMA, right down there with mushrooms and LSD. Of course, they can be dangerous if taken too much, but actually, you can't even overdose on LSD. You can take 10,000 times the amount of recommended dosage for LSD, as you know, and you won't even. You'll have a crazy trip, and it will take a while for that medicine to get out of you, but you're not going to die. There's no like long-term physiological harm. Of course, you could kind of lose your marbles a little bit while you're on the medicine if you're taking that much. But anyway, so I see a lot of breakthroughs happening. I see culture coming around. I see more leaders, entrepreneurs endorsing it. Like you got the Aaron Rodgers ayahuasca, Netflix series. I think it's going to keep spreading, but the next 10 to 20 years, the people that are in the know are not waiting around for our government to pass things.
Yeah.
Because they don't wait around anyhow.
I mean, I feel that same way. I mean, I think that everyone, just collectively as humanity, just watching like what's happened in the last 10 years, I think that the legal aspects are less important than the cultural like acceptance. Cause I know, police officers and politicians are just like full advocates, and they're just like, why would we prosecute something that like genuinely helping my niece and my, uncles to like heal completely. And so I think the information that we are advocating is really the service. And I think that most people, are seeing through the bullshit of the government and seeing through the bullshit led to these becoming classified as Schedule I drugs, which is honestly like what I feel like should happen is just a massive class action lawsuit against the government for the millions and millions of people that have lost their lives to PTSD and to, addiction because these haven't been available in the past. And I don't know. I kind of go on a little rant about trying Nancy Reagan for crimes against humanity for war.
And Richard Nixon and everyone. I mean, my wife wouldn't be alive without the medicines.
No,
and our daughter wouldn't have her mom. So it's like that was
So tune us in just the last couple of minutes. Like I know we just had a brief chance to drop in your world, and I love talking to you and would love to continue the conversation. But I would love for you to just kind of tune in to what final message, do you want to share with everyone that's listening? Like what's the message on your heart that you feel like is most needed in the world and that you want to share?
Biggest thing that comes to mind is our higher self, the self that is capable of fulfilling our deepest desires and dreams. I love the root word desire. The root word for desire is desire, of the Father. So if you think of our Judeo-Christian heritage, it's like almost that desire was placed by God or the universe for the fulfillment of your dreams. Yet, sadly, most people are going to live a life far beneath what they were capable of. These medicines just create an opening, and if done properly in a loving, safe container, and that's an asterisk, got to be in a loving, safe container with the right medicine, the right setting, all that jazz. They can create access, deepen that access to your best self, deepen that access to the most fulfilling life, the most amount of joy, the most amount of love. Your soul is longing for that. And I want to invite you to explore, whether you start with microdosing, whether you start with a virtual experience, whether you start with just breath work. Breath work can be almost psychedelic. Slower, way slower, but it's great. Explore the possibility that you were meant to fulfill your desires. And these are just tools. They're not dangerous if used properly. And they can be one of the biggest gifts of your life. So that's what I would. invite people to explore and invite what could happen if they did.
And such a beautiful message for anyone that's listening that is like really wanting to optimize their lives, their performance, step into greater capacity to create that feels drawn to explore working with you or learning more from you. What would be the best way for them to tune in or to reach you?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media channels at the Mike Zeller, so you can find me there. I am engaged on Instagram and YouTube especially, and then also I have a downloadable resource that goes through the 14 main tools for rewiring your nervous system, psychedelics being one of them. And your nervous system is your automatic default response. So that's just at neurorewiring.com, or you can find more info, what I'm doing, at mikezeller.com and other places. But I'd say that's the main spot I'd encourage people to go to neurorewiring.com. Then you'll get some tools around how to upgrade your nervous system rapidly, get some other insight on how important that is. It's almost everything your body does is in the subconscious or the automatic nervous system. So if we can get that tuned up and you showing up, then your automatic way of showing up is going to reflect who you really are and what you really want in life. So
thank you so much, Mike, for that. And thank you to everyone that joined us for this episode, and join us next time for Psychedelics, Sex, and the Superconscious. And until then, just remember, this is your life. Make it legendary.
Thank you, legendary explorers, for joining us on this cosmic journey today.
Your curiosity fuels our exploration of psychedelics, sex, and the superconscious.
If you're hungry for more, dive into our website and connect with us on social media. All the links are in the show notes.
And stay tuned for our next mind-expanding episode. We can't wait to talk to you again in our next adventure.
Until then, remember, this is your life. So,
make it legendary.